Hey guys, it's Dasher Zach, back with another review, this time of the Rapoo VT7 and VT9 Pro. It's my first time trying mice from Rapoo, and I happen to have one of their Gen 1 and Gen 2 mice. The VT7 here is the non-max Gen 2 version, of which they made a ton of improvements, and this shape being very similar to the Viper V3 Pro. And then the VT9, which is sort of a unique shape unto itself, maximum back flare, interesting aesthetic, and exciting to see the Gen 2 coming soon. The main question here is, how good are these mice from Rapoo, and are they worth you picking up? Let's find out. So here we have them, a couple of mice from Rapoo, VT7 Gen 2 and the VT9. The VT7 Gen 2, this is the non-max edition, is sort of Rapoo's take on the Viper V3 Pro shape with a slight twist. This is the non-max version, so there's no coating. It has different switches. And then we have the VT9 here, which is a mouse unto itself. This is the Gen 1, the Pro 1K edition. There is also a Gen 2 coming, which is making a bunch of massive improvements. I will talk about that mouse because I'm actually a little bit more excited for that one. But I do want to cover this as sort of a preview. It's the first time I've covered Rapoo mice on my channel, which might be surprising, but I think they're really stepping it up with their Gen 2 mice, so I wanted to sort of get in on the game that way. There's also been a lot of hype in my Discord server, and I trust a lot of the opinions there, so I figured I would jump on the bandwagon a little bit here. Both of these mice are rocking, I believe, a 3398, which I believe is just a slightly upgraded 3395. Both are capable of 8K pulling. This one comes default with it. But without blabbing on too much, let's just jump right into the implementation first of this VT7. Again, the non-max edition, so it has the on-rod 100M mechanical switches. They are, as you've heard me say 8 million times, very light and spammable. There is some tactility there, but there's also a mixture of some sponginess in the clicks, so they're very, very functional in game. But I also think that they're just like not quite the most satisfying click feel. They do stay pretty light throughout the entire click, a very consistent level of force needed for actuation, which is pretty nice to see. There's almost no side-to-side play, so the click and shell design here is very nice. Also, the way the clicks are designed here, there is a large spot to rest your finger without too much risk of a pinch here on the right side. And then nestled up here between the clicks are two reprogrammable buttons, which I know a lot of people will appreciate, and is actually a cool feature as much as I do not love the aesthetics of it. So overall, click's not bad at all. Relatively well implemented, not too much pre or post travel, nice rebound, nice in use, just not quite the best feeling, but honestly, as much as I harp on click feel, once you get into the heat of the moment, I know at least myself, I sort of forget about it and just play the game, so really not an issue functionally. Coming to the scroll wheel, as you can see here, there's like a varied width on the rubber on the scroll wheel, but I can't really feel that as I'm using it. The steps here are defined, probably like a medium light leading level of step. It's not a full mechanical switch here, but it is a very spammable click, and it's not overly stiff either, so it's a very functional scroll wheel, no real complaints from me. Jumping over to the side buttons, I absolutely love the size and shape of them. I don't really mind there being a slight gap here. I think it helps differentiate when you're trying to find the side buttons or like locate them very, very quickly in game. Very different sizes here and a huge spot here at the back for your thumb to hit if that's where it rests. A very standard placement as well for these side buttons. The click itself rebounds very nicely and is very spammable. It's got a slightly plasticky dead sound, but it doesn't feel bad at all in use. There's a bit more pre-travel here than I'd like to see. It doesn't really sink into the shell too much. There's a little bit of wobble back and forth, but it's within my acceptable tolerances. I will say one thing I noticed is that the back button is more responsive here toward the front than it is toward the back. Occasionally you'll get like a little bit more like play, as you can see there, pressing it in. You take note of that depending on your grip and where you intend to press the button here. It seems from my grip that I do actually look at my thumb right here at the front, so it's not really an issue, and it's pretty consistent across the front side button there. Transition to the bottom of the mouse, we have very nice large pad skates. No issues with these, beside that you can see they pick up some like debris, some hair there. They are thick, nicely rounded, of a good speed. Did not hold me back at all in game. Love the large pad skate design. Actually felt good on glass, felt good on cloth, not sluggish in any way. Solid skates, win here from Rapoo. This little thing here, which I would drop because it's about a gram in game. And we have a very central sensor placement here as well. So the bottom of the mouse, a strong pass for me. Build integrity wise, not the strongest. This angling shows it the best. I can't really push in this side shell here, and if I want actuate the side buttons in use, you're not going to feel any flex at all though. Nothing really notable here on the front, top, back, and across the bottom here, even with the door, not really any flex that caused any problems. So overall, plenty well built, no issues. Coming to the coating though, again, this doesn't have one. I wish I could tell you what the coatings on the Gen 2 Max editions are. I do have a VT0 Max coming. I really want to feel the coating on that. Do note the non-Max versions in like the special colorway. So for example, on this mouse, the blue colorway do have a coating, and I've heard it's actually pretty good. And they also have what I believe are binned Razer opticals like Razer uses. I think they're called Razer opticals on the AliExpress listings. And if you use the Viper V3 Pro, they're going to feel pretty similar to that click feel. So overall implementation wise here, not too much to complain about. The clicks could feel a little bit better, but in game, very good, very satisfying, very spammable. Really like the design of the side buttons, and unless you're pressing here on the back, you won't have any issues. And even there on the back, it's fine unless you're trying to really spam it. And I can even get some good runs at it too there on the back. So overall, the side button design, huge, which I really do appreciate. Good skates, good build integrity, passable scroll wheel. Honestly, very strong implementation here. And obviously the main issue with the VT7 non-max is the lack of coating, and that makes me very excited to try out the coating on their max editions. And overall, just a very promising sort of glow up here from the Gen 1 Rapoo, which is what I will cover here here now with the VT9. The VT9, before I get into it, the shape of this mouse is kind of crazy. It has a massive back flare, and this has like sort of a more like a little bit angular gamer aesthetic. There's like a ridge here, like a GPX. You can see like how it's sort of tapered there. More like differentiated look between the narrow and the wide here. On the scroll wheel, it's even more obvious. And even the side buttons have sort of like an angular Gundam gamer look to them. Again, this mouse I believe is $30 usually on Amazon, but with this Gen 2 base level one being 40. But we're still waiting for these, at least in the US, on Gen 2 to come to Amazon. I believe Canada does have some of them for what it's worth. But jumping into the implementation, the iMon 50Ms here in the VT9, they're functional in game. They're actually on the spongier side even than the VT7. Not really a good click feel at all, I would say here. There's a bit too much pre-travel, a bit too much post-travel. You can see this sort of like hovers over the edge. There's a little bit of bend there. So like if I click here at the bottom, not the best experience. Not at all a problem I had in the VT7. Play-wise, there's some there, but it's not really a problem. I guess this was sort of a little bit a looser button here. And it does get a bit heavier at the top. One weird fun thing I noticed is if you press on the outside of the buttons here, so like maybe not, that might explain some of the sponginess. This is 100% corrected in the Gen 2 one from what I've been told and seen in a couple of videos online. But I don't think this is really a problem. This is just sort of, honestly, it's kind of a fun thing to do. But no real complaints about the switches themselves. Just a little bit lesser of build quality here on the first gen. I did play some games with this, and I mean, in use, it was totally fine. Like if you want to pick this up for $20 and you like the shape, I'm not going to say no, don't do it. You know, it's not a bad mouse, but it's just, there are some shortcomings for sure. This also has the reprogrammable buttons here on the top. But I think I've talked enough about these clicks. Let's jump into the scroll wheel. This one's louder than the Gen 2 one, and it actually does have the full mechanical switch there. It's kind of pingy, and the one thing I forgot to mention about these is they are also on like the pingier side of switches. I will do a sound test for these later, just so you can hear that more clearly. Medium light steps, very nice click though, no complaints there. The side buttons are also a bit of an adventure on this. Not the largest, you can see, especially compared to these Gen 2s, which the VT9 Gen 2 has these nicer, bigger buttons. These are a little bit angular. I do like the ridge here in the middle. That makes them very easy to find and click. They are on the like cheaper, more plasticky feeling side here. And this back one here has like a huge amount of play to it. Yeah, you can see you can sink that really far in the front and the back. The front one a little bit more. Now the front one's really loose. Yeah, the side buttons overall are just really loose. The issue with these side buttons is there's too much overall travel. They're a bit too stiff to actuate, and they don't rebound quite as nicely as I'd like. If you just press them once or twice, like to switch to a different weapon in Fortnite, for example, they're fine, but they're definitely not my favorite side buttons. Coming to the bottom here, these skates are actually pretty thick. They're nicely rounded. They're slower, I think, than the Gen 2 skates. They're not my favorite skates. It's a weird design how they have them, but it is plenty of surface area covered here, and they do perform all right. Like, it's not a reason to not get this version of the mouse. Also not my favorite skates. There's a reason they changed them in the Gen 2. Same door here. Pretty essential sensor placement as well. Build quality, you saw how the switches here sort of like pop up on the sides if you press them. Yeah, pretty far there. Beside that, not really a lot of side flex. Not really a lot of bottom. Like, flex-wise, not a problem here. Massive like risk for pinch here though with the shell design. Again, clean that up in the Gen 2. They clearly got a lot of feedback and implemented it very well, so props to them for that. I'll once again point out this is like the GPX ridge, but it's even more defined. So if you grip anywhere in this area, you will feel this ridge. But yeah, overall build quality in this is not amazing, I'll be honest. There is no coating on this either. It's just the bare plastic. So overall, the implementation of the VT9 is definitely a step down, and it being the Gen 1, that makes sense from the VT7 that I have here. Definitely not the worst mouse I've felt. It doesn't feel like cheap. It does feel solid, but I guess that's because of the higher weight that I'll cover here a little bit later. It's almost 70 grams. I believe 68 is what it comes in at, whereas we're at 55 here on the VT7. And I believe the Gen 2 VT9 is also a lighter mouse. Probably just going to leave a lot of you wanting me to review that by the end of the video, and hopefully that'll be coming soon. But overall, again, this is $27 typically on Amazon. For $20, if someone liked the shape a lot, didn't want to spend a bit more for a Gen 2, like, I wouldn't chastise them for grabbing it. I would just be aware that it's not the best implemented mouse, and that's just really made apparent by all of the, honestly, kind of goated improvements they've made on their Gen 2s. I'm going to start for shape comparisons with this VT9. It feels huge in hand due to this almost 67mm back flare, which is 3mm wider than the VT7, but it's only 125mm long, so like it's like right in that GPX range, and 39mm tall with this sort of slight back, but like very tall mid-presence hump. It's very filling. If I do my standard grip, it's almost a palm grip, basically. I can get like a relaxed claw, but there's still like some contact from this part of the mouse on my palm here. I don't really have a mouse to directly compare it to, but putting it here next to the sort of Viper shape, it's a little bit taller. This is 1mm taller. It looks so angular. Like, you can see the bit more hump presence here, which is nice. It's sort of like long and how it falls off in the back there, which actually does give it a little bit less of that upper palm contact than the VT7 or the Viper V3 would have. And it is just a very angular, like ridged mouse, and you do feel that in hand. Like, my palm touches these ridges here. I don't contact this ridge, but like, yeah, I'm just gonna sort of give you an idea of what this shape looks like top to bottom. I will say my thumb does nicely fit right where this taper ends. Maybe the best thing I could do is like show you this is like an XM2W. It has a similar amount of back flare, but you can see here how much more quickly you reach the back of the mouse than the XM2, like I was talking about, and how just much more pronounced and like sort of jutted out the back of this VT9 is. So it's a very unique shape. It's one you have to try for yourself to see if you really like it. I am excited to try it on the VT9 on the Gen 2. Let's come back to the mouse I'm featuring a little bit more prominently, that being the VT7 here. Again, their Viper V3 Pro shape take, but look at that, not an ambi mouse. There's a flare in here on the left side, and the right side is almost entirely flat. Now in hand, in game, it's not the most apparent thing, but you can tell it's there. Like my pinky sits on that more flat part here on the right side, whereas my thumb is able to sink in there. I will say it's more apparent on the side of the mouse that your thumb is on, so them having the sort of like more ambi design on the left hand side where the thumb is does work well for me. This still feels very, very Viper V3 Pro shape in hand, and I'm gonna get this X2 off my desk because it's not what I'm comparing it to. And whip out the good old goat coating white Viper V3 Pro I have here that I picked up as a secondary copy and literally have not plugged in. Go figure. But we'll start with the front on here. These mice are going to look a little bit different, obviously, because Razer has this unique design here. Click height is very similar. Razer's comfort grooves are a little bit more defined with the way the button sort of dips here. There are comfort grooves here on the VT7, but I guess I do wish they were a bit more defined. I do like how my fingers just fit right in these grooves on the Viper V3 Pro. But when it comes down to it, these mice are virtually the exact same height, width, and length, 127 millimeters long. As you can see here, the same hump profile, relatively the same height throughout the entire mouse. As much as I do like Razer's side button design, I think I actually like the size and shape of the Rapoo side buttons better. And the Rapoo side buttons are actually a little less stiff and a little more responsive and tactile. So oddly enough, I do usually say I like these side buttons, but the Rapoo ones are better. The side angle also does really sort of highlight that difference in comfort grooves on the main clicks. The back hump here falls off the same. It's pretty much the same throughout the entire rest of the mouse. We'll just take one peek here at the bottom of the mouse, and that again shows off how we have a nice defined comfort groove here on the right, where your pinky might rest depending on your grip, and how just almost shockingly flat we stay here on the top or the right side of the VT7. More GPX-esque in that way. And for those of you wondering, because the X1 from ATK had a crazy sensor position, these are virtually the same sensor position, and if any brands are watching this video, you've probably noticed the points how hard it is to show off in my lighting these black mice. There you go, I guess. Please send me the white version of the mouse if you have it available, or if it's a non-black or white that pops the most on screen, does best in the thumbnail, shows up best in the video. Anyway, beyond shape comparisons, both these mice are in the sort of size range of the Maya X, the Viper V3 Pro, the GPX, or like the Vaxi XE, I guess the V2 that they're on now. Theoretically, this could be a mouse that I add to my Viper V3 Pro clone list, especially with the competitive pricing on it. Where I would rank this in that list is interesting. I actually hadn't deeply considered that until this exact moment. I would want to get my hands on the max version to assess the coding and the different clicks, but this is a very solid entry, especially at 40 bucks. That's kind of a steal. Notably, having the new 54 series Nordic MCU as well. I will say I saw it on Tech Power Up. I haven't done extensive testing. I never do super extensive testing like Pizogle does, but there were massive issues with 8K pulling, I believe. Some issues in wired mode, which I personally don't really care about, but if you do, there you go. There was pulling instability, which I did see across the board in my mouse test for testing, and that was also verified by Pizogle as well. And then the click latency on these is actually not great. Most of you playing 1 and 2K were 4.2 to 4.5 milliseconds, which in reality isn't going to make or break your performance. Most likely your slight changes in reaction time will vary probably 30, 40 plus milliseconds per. So like this isn't going to kill you, but an era of mice where everything is so good and we are trying to min-max every little bit we can get, you just don't really love to see this for what it's worth. Let's check out what the conclusion was. It was listed as a great value, but not necessarily an editor's choice. And just to note something I hadn't mentioned here, the VT7 Max only comes in at $60, which competes, I believe, with the ATK X1 Pro Max, Ueden S9 Ultra. So they're sort of toward the top end clones, not quite like the X1 Ultimate, but you would like to see slightly better click latency and slightly more stable performance and pulling. We'll see if maybe some updates come to the mice to address that. So overall impressions of these mice, I'm actually relatively impressed with this VT7 here. Again, I'm gonna sound like a broken record. I want to try the Max version. I want to feel that coding and those different clicks. And this is a different sensor than the 3950 and the Max version that was reviewed for Tech Power Up. So hey, maybe this doesn't have those issues. In game, in hand, this felt really good. I was able to perform with it very well. The Viper V3 Pro is one of my more enjoyed shapes. Love the side button design. Again, solid skates. Clicks that don't bother me at all in game and are very, very functional. And overall, I mean, you can't really go wrong cloning this shape. I do sort of appreciate Rapoo having their slightly different take on it with the flatter right side here. Changing it up, remixing it a bit. I do appreciate that. And overall, for 40 bucks, very, very impressed with the VT7. This VT9, again, coming in $20 to $27. Again, just it feels a little bit dated in the overall like implementation, design, aesthetics, even skates of the mouse. Not the worst value necessarily at $27, but it's not a mouse that I would strongly recommend. And again, look out for the Gen 2 coming soon, mostly due to the unique shape here that I think might appeal to some people. So encouraging, exciting stuff from Rapoo, and definitely looking forward to testing more of their mice. And now let's hit a couple sound tests. So jumping into the web software, which is interesting to me because I've never actually used Rapoos before, it is very custom and very good. You can set your DPI here on this screen. On the key remapping screen, you can go to like those DPI switches, for example, change them to other functions on the mouse, something from your keyboard or a macro. Pretty sick. Going to the performance, they have a bunch of different versions. Obviously, we have the polling rates here. I tested mostly on 2K, but we have office, balance, fire, hyper, blah, blah, blah. I tested on maximum RF and theory gaming, which I believe is the 20K implementation. And this battery life calculator here is pretty cool. If you go to adaptive and fire, for example, they actually advertise up to 400 hours of battery life, which is kind of cracked with this new Nordic MCU. Again, I'm not exactly sure what the difference is here. I wouldn't suggest doing anything beside this hypercore corded mode, most likely. Maximum RF seems to take a negligible amount of battery life off as well, and then you can see it decreases here. Even this is an acceptable amount of battery life for me, for what that's worth. On the parameters tab, you see stuff like motion sync, angle snap, ripple control, things I always have turned off. LOD here I had cranked down to the minimum. There isn't actually glass mode for the 3950, so I can't turn it on here. And as you can see, you can drop the debounce to 0 for these mechanical switches, and I experienced absolutely no issues with slam clicks. But wait, there's more. In some good news, there is also a desktop driver. This is required to update the firmware on your mouse, but also on the off chance that you have an issue where your mouse company decides their web driver is not going to work, you have a desktop driver to use as well, which is a huge plus. Just a quick heads up before we do weights and measurements, it does sound like per a Mousecast viewer that the latest firmware of the VT7 and all the Gen 2s does deal with a lot of the polling rate instability issues that we're seeing. Click latency hasn't fully been tested yet, but it does seem like Rapoo is working to improve some issues they had, which is nice to see. And now we have the VT7 non-max coming in completely stock at 56.5 grams with the skates on, so about 3 grams above advertised, 2 grams above the Viper V3 Pro, right in the same weight range. And then we get the VT9 Pro coming in at 69.3 grams, quite a hefty mouse. As far as weight balancing goes, this one seems pretty well balanced to me, and then in some tests of the VT7, it felt a little bit back heavy with the weight being centered behind the sensor in my opinion. As far as measurements go, I get the narrowest part of the grip width here at 58.7 millimeters. That's a decidedly narrower 56.5 on the Viper V3 Pro because of its full ambi shape. Back flare comes in at a modest 63.8 millimeters, this being ever so slightly wider than the Viper V3 Pro. I get the max hump height on the VT7 coming in at about 39.4 millimeters, just about the same as the 39.3 millimeters here on the Viper V3 Pro. I get the VT9 tapering down to 57.7 millimeters, a massive max back flare of 66.7 millimeters, and a max hump height around 38.2 millimeters. So that about sums it up for my thoughts on the Rapoo VT7 and VT9. I definitely have a strong lean toward the Gen 2 mice from Rapoo, as they have made a lot of improvements. They're not quite perfect yet, and I would love to try the max version of their mice, which I'll definitely be doing here soon. I'll be sure to report back when I do. Please subscribe and like if you enjoyed the video. Follow me on X at DasherZack. Check out the Mousecast podcast. Join up with my peripheral Discord. And with that, we'll see you.